Well, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, not a too long hiatus since we last recorded. Um, no, thanks for introducing me to Jason Theobald. That one was an incredible episode that we recorded, and he'll be coming back on to do more episodes like we're about to do, which are going to be more of the scientific based, more nitty gritty that I haven't actually done any of these episodes before. So you're basically going to be the main person that I'm just going to ask questions to and just going to let you roll with it. If you're good with that.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm always game to talk about stuff. I try to talk like put a little different angle on things because I mean, some of the stuff's pretty redundant, because people talk about a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
I feel you.
I guess the main thing's like try to make it understandable to where it's not just a bunch of jargon that people don't understand, and then also that they can like go out and apply it after they listen, right?
Yeah, I think that's the job of the coach is to make very scientific stuff simple for people to learn
Yep.
that they'll be able to take note of and makes it simple for them to apply in life. That's the
Yeah.
exact point. So, how's before we get into that, how's life been since we last recorded? I think it was like I want to say it was like a month ago. About probably I think actually to this date, I think it's exactly a month since we recorded.
Yeah, it's probably about that. Let's see. Well, nothing's really changed. I am just been super busy, which I'm always thankful for. Never mad about that. Uh, Training, eating far more than I would care to eat,
Yeah, it
and
seems like that.
it's been a real struggle. But just doing what I have to, trying to adjust and maybe learn a couple things along the way, how I can improve, next time type of thing.
Yeah, you're up to what are you up to? Like 1,200 grams of carbs, I think it was last time you uh posted about or something,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I've been moving it around a little bit to see if different ratios of macros help my appetite at all. Like uh, I don't really do like I did more specific nutrient timing and things like that along the way. But I think
Yeah.
once you get to 7,000 calories, like the amount that matters is so minuscule at that point. It's literally just, because you're not really going to be able to separate carbs and fat and stuff quite as effectively when you're eating a lot of everything,
Yeah.
you know.
I feel like
So
it just comes to a point where you just got to get the calories in and it's
yeah,
just finding the time to get them in. Actually, that's like the nutrient timing is just how long do I separate between meals?
yeah, timing, food selection, like what you're actually eating,
Yeah.
always makes a difference. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah. No, me and Mark are same work, putting up. I think I'm around 1 or 2 pounds heavier than I was a month ago, somewhere like that. So taking it slow, taking it easy. Weights are increasing every single week. It's nice to get fully settled into a gym. Uh, but we'll see with some added stressors within the next week with a full time job starting. So that will probably add a little stress to my life, which I don't need. But life is life, and you gotta roll with the punches.
There's
Um,
never, that like there's never a perfect time to do anything, really.
exactly. Yeah. If
I
you
had
have a
that
perfect
discussion.
time, then you're just like whatever.
Yeah, I had that discussion with someone the other day. They kind of like beat around the bush, like, well, I've got this and this. Like, there's never a perfect time. I mean, of course, there's times that might be worse than others. You can work around things the best you can, but
Yeah.
there's always going to be some excuse, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's always gonna be something in a way that's stopping people from it's like the scarcity mindset. It's like there's always money, whether it's money, time, obligations, jobs. There's always an excuse for people, and it's the people who get those excuses out of their heads and actually do the work that are the ones who are successful. So
Yeah. don't look for an excuse, look for an opportunity or a solution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think one thing people should probably excuse a bunch of time for, which is what we're going to get into today, is sleep. I think this is the one thing that people always, and I won't say I am on the other side, probably the very poor side, but I was because of my job, formerly working at a bar. You work late at night. I got really shit sleep for for like 2.5 years, 3-4 hours of sleep every night for like, well, on and off like 3 or 4 nights a week. Really does hurt your body, and you don't realize it until you actually start to get good sleep, and then you realize what the fuck was I doing to my body for 2.5 years. But this is the one topic I think everybody needs to get better at, and it's one of the hardest things to get better at, I believe.
Yeah, and there's a lot of really small things that that I think are worth pointing out. People that have schedules like that. You can't really make up for lack of sleep later. Sleep debt is sleep debt. If you can't sleep for 4 hours a night, 4 days a week, and think you're going to make up for it on the weekend type of thing.
Yeah.
It just doesn't, like, that's not how your body recuperates. And also just from like the standpoint of your circadian patterns, they're supposed to be as consistent as possible. So, anytime that you're getting up or going to bed at vastly different times compared to another night, you're going to throw off that pattern. It's going to throw off everything within the sleep cycle. So I guess we could start just some basic stuff, like what actually happens when you sleep, and why you should sleep a certain amount of time, and so on and so forth. There's if you look up research and stuff, you can find some different theories on sleep time versus sleep quality. And I genuinely think it does vary per person. But generally, you have cycles within your sleep. The two main things we have deep sleep and REM sleep. Those are the ones that people know a lot about, right?
Yeah.
And they're for good reason. I mean, it's two of the most important things that occur. And part of the reason that we need a certain amount of sleep is because we do have all these processes that occur while we sleep. So like this idea of, well, I get 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night, but I sleep really deeply. That's better than nothing, but it doesn't really mean that you're going through all the cycles while you sleep.
Okay.
Right. So length of time does matter. Limiting factor being whatever your work schedule is and your life schedule and all that stuff. So I try to have people sleep a minimum of 6 to 7 hours would be like really minimum. I would lean more towards 7 to 8. If you can get 8, it's good for most people if they're good hours. Gets pretty hard for people to get much more than that just because of schedules and stuff. But yeah, beyond that too is timing of sleep. So you shouldn't well, I'm a night owl. Like, well, you've adapted. I mean, you've sort of adapted to that. Because yeah, you can adapt things to a certain extent, but your circadian patterns are also really very much controlled by light and dark. Okay.
Yeah.
So you got to think back. Well, I mean, easy example. Think about before there was electricity. Like people basically operated, and well, you can go even further back than that. Think about before there was fire, right? Before they even had like fire for light.
Yeah.
They basically operated when it was light, and they did it when it was dark. They slept, right?
Yep.
I don't know. I'm not really up on like prehistoric history, but
I'm not either.
Right. I'm assuming that's probably kind of how it went. But yeah, I mean, I did a whole little video kind of talking about circadian patterns and how everything does occur in accordance to light and dark and time. And we do more or less work on like a 24-hour clock, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Yeah, time wise, it does change season to season, right? Because you get different like light and dark times. But generally, generally if you can go to bed between 9 and midnight, it's pretty good. I would say like 9 and 11 is probably even better.
Yeah. I
Um,
typically say around like 10, just because where we're from, at least on the East Coast, it's like 9 p.m. It's still, you're still seeing
right,
some sort of sunlight around here. So
right,
it's like,
for sure.
I don't know
Yeah,
how you're gonna, I mean, I got blackout shades, so we'll leave
right.
that till the end, but that's
Yeah,
like a key
right.
factor in.
Nine nine's on the earlier side, but I'm giving a general reference because in our reality, too early might not necessarily be what you want either, right?
Okay. Yeah.
I'm just trying to give you some time frame there because that's gonna do is set us up for the next morning, right? So it's not like sleep isn't just a because I think you hear a lot now about sleep routine, like all the little things you should do for sleep hygiene.
Yeah.
But it's really, it's super important, but it's really more of a 24-hour clock that we should be looking at. Like what you do during the day makes a difference, in terms of how you sleep at night. Um, Mainly from the standpoint of cortisol secretion and these other adrenal hormones and neurotransmitters that control whether your mood is heightened or depressed down, right?
Yeah.
So whether you're in like parasympathetic versus a sympathetic state in your nervous system. So it really starts in the morning when you get up. You should really be trying to get light in your eyes.
Okay.
Okay.
Hmm.
So if depending on, well, and this isn't always possible for people because sometimes people get up before it's light out, right?
Yeah.
Now, if that's the case, I'll have some people use the little sun lamps.
Okay.
It's like,
Yeah. I want to get
you know,
one. I want to get one. This is like the one thing I want to try, just because sometimes you see this room, it sometimes gets real dark in here. And sometimes I'm like, and like right now it's pouring outside, and I'm not going to go outside and go for a walk. So
yeah,
I need to get my vitamin D in and everything somehow. So I might invest
yeah,
in getting one of these.
it does. It's odd because it's one of those things where you don't pay a lot of attention to it, but you can genuinely tell like when it's really crappy and gloomy outside, it does make a difference in your mood
Okay. Yeah.
when you use it, right? I think mine is, I think it's Viralux, I think is the name of the brand. But I mean, there's a bunch of them on Amazon, and you can read reviews, and I mean, there's a bunch of them on there. But yeah, so if you didn't have light in the morning, you could always use something like that. If you have like a routine where maybe you're in the kitchen, you're getting your meals ready, or if you have to dress a certain way, get ready for work, you could plug it in your bathroom. You know what I mean, or whatever, or put it in your bedroom, whatever. And it's essentially you don't have to stare right at it, but you want to get some of that light into your eyes,
Yep.
right? And that's going to give you it's artificial sunlight. Essentially, it's just what we're going for. If you can't get real sunlight, that's going to just help start that circadian process.
Got
So
it.
certain neurotransmitters are going to be high. Your cortisol is going to go up when you get up. Your adrenaline's going to go up a little bit. So that's essentially what we want in the morning, and that kind of kickstarts the whole thing. And at the end of the day, it's more or less the opposite. You don't want, well, it doesn't take a lot. It doesn't take somebody who's super science minded to figure out that you don't really want your cortisol and adrenaline and dopamine and everything through the roof, like right when you're trying to go to sleep.
Yeah,
So
I was just learning about this actually. So I was like,
right,
so now I actually understand all this with cortisol. So I'm like,
right,
so I'm actually starting
yeah.
to
I mean,
understand this fully.
if you know that they're kind of a awakening hormone or they're a heightening hormone, or whatever, however you want to label it, right? Those, I mean, obviously you don't want those things to be going way up when you're trying to go to sleep, right?
Exactly. Yep.
That's why certain types of supplements and things can help if they bring you down, bring you back down into more of a parasympathetic state and help you sleep. So, but yeah, so we have our morning light exposure. Um, Generally through the day, I mean, outside of training, I would say try to be in a pretty calm state as much as you can. You don't really need to use up all of those resources for your like your sympathetic nervous system throughout the day, right? So if you can be in a calm state as much as possible, you're pretty much going to have the best adrenal function that you can possibly have at that point, because now you're going to be able to get a response for any activity that you need. And in our case, it's training, mainly, right? Or if you do have stress, your body's going to be able to respond. Like, I know it's funny because I'll talk about stress a lot with my clients, and then when they have a stressful couple days or something, that it stresses them out even more. Coach told me I shouldn't be stressed. And I'm like, it's like, well, part of the reason for that is now your body is equipped to be able to handle it. So if you do have stress, you can absorb some stress, right?
Yeah.
Like a person with normal function of their nervous system and adrenals and everything is going to be able to absorb some stress without it negatively impacting them. That's kind of the point, right? So I'm like, well, no. A couple days or whatever is fine. Now, if we're having a few weeks at a time, that's a different story. But yeah, you should be in a place where if you have a stressful day, it's not going to like ruin your week. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the idea between being in that parasympathetic or resting or calm state most of the time, right? And it's such a subconscious thing too, because people just don't realize that, and I'm guilty of it too. I mean, people just don't realize like that they are in that sympathetic state, and it could be anything. Like I'll get really into my emails and I'll go, take a big deep breath. Like, shit, I wasn't even breathing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I was in that the other night, just like looking. I think I was like watching YouTube or something. I always keep. So here's the thing for a lot of people. I mean, we talk about getting sunlight, but the opposite, also keeping parasympathetic, is like blue light, and keeping that. I keep that off of my eyes as much as possible. So I engage night mode on my computer and my phone as much as possible, basically all day. So I never actually see what pictures are actually like when they're high quality, besides for like 3 minutes of my day. And I noticed, like, I was just watching YouTube and I was like, I wasn't even breathing. I was just like watching it, just like stuck in a moment. And I was like, and then I felt my heart start racing and I was like, yep, need to breathe.
Yeah. There's, not to go like too far off in a tangent, but there are some breathing practices that people do where they like hold their breath and like super compensate their lungs with air and things that will cause a sympathetic state to basically jack your adrenaline up. You know what I mean? And these are for different exercises or sports or however they would use these things. I don't know where it was exactly derived from. I've just seen it around. But yeah, it's breathing is obviously important. So just kind of awareness, I guess, is my point. Being aware of this. And there's little things you can do. I'll have some people that, if they're really bad at this, well, and this is typically how I figure it out a lot of times, that they're not really, I have someone they're not doing a ton of training volume, or they sleep pretty good. They don't really have anything in their life going on that's too overly problematic, but they're still showing signs of a large amount of stress. And and I have to look at it and say, well, where is that coming from? Right. And a lot of the time it's emotionally driven, it's just that, and that emotionally driven or anxiety, a lot of that's just anxiety, or overanalyzing or whatever. A lot of that is just, it's, basically you cause it yourself, and it's probably one of the worst stresses because you can do that all day long. So think about like a valve, like a water, right? You open it, let's open it a quarter of the way, but let's leave it open all day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it slowly starts to trickle in and you'll notice it.
But you're going to use a lot of water, right? Yeah. I mean, if you just leave it open all the time, and it's not enough to where, you're really going to notice it, but it's happening. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So you can do little things like journaling can work. And when I say journaling, it doesn't have to be anything extravagant. Like I use this little thing with clients sometimes where they just make tally marks. I'll say, all right, every time during the day that you notice that your heart rate goes up or you stop breathing or you get frustrated or you feel like flushing or that like, where you're getting anything's giving you a rise. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like make a tally mark. And they'll be like, holy shit, that's a lot of tally marks. You know what I mean? Once you look at it. So, all right, well, you can just start lowering the amount of tally marks, right? And that lowers your total stress load. And all that just boils down to is just, for one, if you're aware, you're going to greatly reduce, your stress load right there. And then secondly would just be, the second part's a little more difficult because the second to that would be like actually retraining your perception to things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like how do you actually react to stuff during the day? That's super hard to do because you're just typically used to reacting the same way and you have the same tendencies and you do the same things all the time.
Yeah, it's
right?
It's a personality thing.
Yeah. A lot of it's a personality thing. A lot of it's a habitual thing. And you just, like, I get it. It's not as easy as just saying, oh, well, this used to make me mad and now it's not going to make me mad anymore. Like, it's not, you know what I mean? Like, it's not that easy to do, but any little bit that you can improve on is going to be an improvement. It's going to be a reduction in your stress load. So what does that mean? Well, now that means that you can allocate those resources towards another stressor like training, right?
Yep.
So you really have like it's, if you think of it as a pie chart, you have this pie chart and it'll show you this is your total amount of resources that you have for recovery, and we're recovery / stress. We'll lump those things in together.
Yep.
You have some from sleep, you have some from training, you have some from environmental stress, emotional, like, you see what I mean? Like, you have all these things in there, and it's like, where's the majority of your resources going towards?
Got it.
Yeah.
So
go for it.
So then how does someone know, especially, I want to bring this back to the time thing, because I think that's specifically important with people always assume that right when they fall asleep, they're getting good sleep. A lot of people always assume this. And I want to know, I know there's multiple ways to kind of track it. Like, you can get an Oura ring, you can get a Whoop band. There's multiple ways now that can give you at least some semblance of what your accuracy of what your sleep is. But how do you know, like, as a coach, that someone, like, what might be the telltale signs that someone might not be getting the actual amount of sleep that they're saying they're getting, based upon like that, like looking on that?
So you mean, how would you look at it if they didn't have some kind of tracking device or something like that?
Yeah, like how would you know like the physical kind of like implications of knowing whether someone got like quality sleep for that amount of time, or if they say they went to bed and then they woke up 8 hours later, but they maybe got like 3 or 4 hours of quality sleep?
Yeah, so again, I kind of go back to that pie chart where I'm looking at, where I try to make it as simple as possible for them to understand and also for me to look at. So thinking, okay, and I'll ask these questions within an update, stress, sleep, and also training, so on and so forth. Like, so I can get an idea of what each resource is using up. So I can say, all right, well, you're not very stressed during the day. Your job's going well, family's good, whatever. You're training this much, but your training sessions are pretty good. You're sleeping this much, but yet they're still tired. You know what I mean? Like, yet they still have a lot of these
They have that tired and wired feeling.
Yeah, so there can be different. So it depends on how complex that this can get pretty complex just because if you're looking at it from strictly a nervous system standpoint and looking at your adrenal gland function, it can manifest itself in several different ways. Um, Tired and wired could be one of them for sure, or just tired, or generally what you'll see, and without going too far into that side of things, but generally what you would see first is you would see someone with high cortisol, which just means their body's dumping cortisol often, right?
Yep.
And it could be for any of those reasons that we talked about. All right. What would happen after that would be they would be in that state for so long that they ended up with bottomed out cortisol, right? Because their resources are completely gone.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends on, again, like how was it a chronic thing where they stressed out for 2 days or a week or even 2 weeks, or were they stressed out for like 6 months? You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm just looking at physical symptoms and how they feel and how they perform, and I do process of elimination. Think, well, this is good, it's probably not this. This is good, it's probably not this. You know what I mean? And I can see, and then I can even, if I suspect it might be their sleep, I can ask other questions too, like, do they have a spouse or a partner that they sleep with? Well, what's their partner's feedback? Do they toss and turn a lot? Do they get up a lot? Maybe not realize it, like kind of, sleepwalking type thing. Do they snore a lot? Maybe they have, or gasp for air, like maybe they have sleep apnea, right? Like I can ask questions. And then why does this happen? Do they move around? It could be simple stuff. Like I had a guy the other day, all I had him do was, I was like, dude, he's a big guy, and him and his wife sleep in a queen bed, and he's like 280. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I'm like, dude, you just need to get a better bed. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I know beds aren't necessarily a super cheap investment sometimes, like they can cost some money.
Yeah.
But I said, you spend this much amount of time in your bed, and it's going to drastically, and drastically alter your performance and how you feel and your health. And yeah, that's one thing that I did. I was looking at my sleep so much and doing all these little things I talked about, and like thinking, what is something that would wake me up in the middle of the night? You get hot, you get uncomfortable, whatever, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I've done a lot lately is I've just basically changed my bedding. I use like all silk pillowcases now, which aren't super cheap, but they keep my head super cool.
Yeah, they are. They are cold. Yeah.
They're very nice if you've ever used them.
Yeah, no, that's a big one, because it's really funny, because my house, the air conditioning duct doesn't come into my room the way they built the
So it gets
house.
warm in there.
So during this time, I'm left with a fan and a nice little window, and I have a fan that direct, like this tiny ass thing right here that hits me right in my head. So I'll remain cool. I try to remain as cool as possible throughout the night. Sometimes difficult. But what's it's kind of to sorry to kind of interrupt, but what's like the maximum amount that you think someone should be waking up in the middle of the night? Because I think a lot of every time you hear a bodybuilder kind of talk about this, they're always like, well, I get up usually at least once a night to go to the bathroom throughout the middle of the night. Or whether you're actually a pro, you look at someone like James Hollingshead, who's been on multiple shows, and he's like, I wake up sometimes to even just get a meal in. Like, is there a point to where maybe is one time not bad for people to get up throughout the middle of the night? Basically, that's what I'm trying to ask.
Yeah. All right. So first off, I'm not going to use James Hollingshead as an example because that's not really like a good representation of most of us.
Yeah,
You
that's
know
true.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Obviously he works really hard and he's a great pro and he's, made a ton of progress. But we'll say like just in a general sense for how this applies to most people.
Yeah.
Um,
Sorry,
um,
I just wanted to see
yeah,
it.
no, I
Pretty
got
cool.
you. Well, I got you the only reason I say that is because some people are like, wow, so and so says you should get up and eat in the middle of the night or whatever.
No,
I'm like,
he's a
well,
genetic freak.
yeah, I'm not taking anything away from him. I'm just trying to give like a more um, equal representation of most people. So yeah, this is what I would say is what happens when you get up. So like, for example, if someone gets up once a night and they have to pee, do they get up, they go to the bathroom, and they get right back in bed, fall right back to sleep type thing? Like they know they got up, but they're basically like crawl to the bathroom, go to the bathroom, fall right back to sleep. That's one thing. Now, are they getting up and they have like heightened heart rate, or they have like cravings for food, or they have, things like this? That's saying something entirely different, because generally what would happen there is, and that's one of the first things I ask is like, what do you feel if you're having a lot of disrupted sleep? Like, what do you feel when it happens? And sometimes you'll have people that have like say, oh, I wake up, but my heart rate is like, I kind of pop up. You know what I mean? Like I kind of pop out of bed and my heart rate is up, and I'm of course very tired because I just woke up out of a dead sleep, but I'm also kind of alert. Does that make sense? My heart rate's up.
Yep.
So that's, something like that is more of an adrenal thing. What that could indicate is that there's some disruption in their, in their circadian pattern there, and they're getting like a dump, what I call an adrenal dump. Like they're dumping, adrenaline and cortisol in the middle of the night for whatever reason. So that wouldn't be good.
Okay.
That's going to be different than they have to get up and maybe go to the bathroom once.
Okay.
I'm trying to think. There's other like dietary factors and stuff too, of course. It gets a little bit harder when you're very, very lean and you're eating less, and because things just, you don't have a lot of, you hold less fluid, you don't have a lot of fat cells to hold any fluid and stuff. It is harder to make it through a night without going to the bathroom.
So when
All right.
someone gets that adrenal dump, what's your case for actually trying to solve that and help them improve that in some sort of fashion?
Yeah, it's not, there isn't really one specific thing like you have this adrenal dump, you need to take this supplement or something like that. It's just, we're just going to trace back. All right, what's wrong with your routine? Right? Why is this happening? Because that's the thing, is there's so many different ways that very heightened stress load can cause problems.
Yep.
That could be one of them. It could be that. It could also be like, I have somebody that they wake up at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning without an alarm. They can't fall back to sleep, but they don't really need to wake up till, I don't know, like 7, right? That's just, why are they waking up like that? Why is that happening? Well, if they were to stop and like they were to get their blood drawn right there and see, their cortisol is probably up, right? That's when their body is waking up. That's when they're getting that waking response. It's just happening earlier than they want it to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they could, they can rework their sleep schedule where they go to bed a little bit earlier. Or they could just look at their total amount of sleep that they're getting. I mean, if they're getting enough sleep, because sometimes that'll happen too if you try to sleep too much. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, your body might not want to let you lay in bed for 12 hours.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it might wake you up on purpose by like I said, by releasing those hormones. It's waking you up and it's trying to get you out of bed because you don't need to sleep that long. So Yeah, but like I said, any issue really, we're just going to trace back and try to figure out what the gap is in the routine. Now, where it gets a little more vague, like not as black and white, is that it might not always be just one thing in the routine. Like, oh, you're doing this. You're not blocking blue light at night, or you're training like 30 minutes before you go to sleep, and that's keeping you up, or something. Like, it might not be anything that's really cut and dry. It could just be their total stress load is shit, and it can be a cumulative thing. Like, it's hard for me sometimes, because I'll get clients like that they've had these issues for years, and they're a new client, and I'm trying to figure out, all right, what is the problem? So I can get their lab work done. I can do some in-depth testing. Like, if you've ever heard me talk about doing a Dutch test, which is a urine test.
Yeah,
like
many times.
Yeah, you can do those things. Like, I can do that, and I can see what their patterns and stuff look like, but that doesn't tell me why it's happening. That just tells me that what's happening, not why.
Gotcha.
So I just have to try to staple down the routine as much as I can, and then I can keep an eye on it, and I can try to see where the gaps are, right? I can see what's probably causing the issues. And sometimes you have to change things that you don't necessarily want to change. Some things that people aren't really going to like I might have to, I'm trying to think of a good example. So I might have to reduce stress load from training. I have a girl right now that her schedule, no, I'll give you an even better one. I'm sure he won't mind me mentioning it if he even listens, but I have a guy that he works like 80 to 100 hours a week. All right.
Okay. Yeah, that's
Crazy.
a lot.
Yeah. Crazy schedule. So, that is taking up 85% of his pie chart right there.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like, even if he's low stress at work, which I have a feeling he has some stressful stuff going on, that's taken up a lot of his resources. So let's say that he does budget his time extremely well, and he can still squeeze in like 6-7 hours of sleep most nights. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That's being optimistic, right?
Yeah.
All right. So he's doing okay there. So what do we have to take away from to reduce his stress load? He can't train as much.
Yeah.
Now, because his training, is there going to be any benefit in him trying to train 5 to 6 days a week with high intensity when he has that? Like, no
He's
way.
just going to overshoot his cortisol, and he's not going to actually recover from anything.
Yeah. He won't recover. He won't make any progress. He'll regress. He will get worse for sure. So is it ideal from like the standpoint of having more training stimulus? No, but it's the only way that he's going to recover and make any semblance of progress. And so this person specifically is already in a very deep hole in terms of stress debt. Like, his body's already in a very bad spot. So not only do we have to get him to recover on a weekly basis, but now we're actually trying to dig him back out of the hole. So ideally, what would you do with somebody like that? Ideally, you might not even have them train at all, which is like the craziest thing anyone's ever heard and would make him super depressed. So I'm not going to do that. Right. Yeah. Because there's some from a practical standpoint, it wouldn't work, because he'd be very, very, very depressed.
Yeah.
So,
that would be bad.
So that would, in that sense, that would make it worse. Right. But I'm like, look, there's literally no other way that we can reduce stress other than gonna have to train less. Like there's
Yeah.
nothing else you can do, you know? So yeah, that's, you know, we're looking at, I guess my point is like trying to solve any types of problems. Like I said, kind of go back to that pie chart reference and try to figure out what's lacking, and then go into that, you know, go into that variable. So you can do other things, like if if it's a training, if you need to reduce training, you can do other things like, well, I still am going to train 4 days a week, but I'm only going to go to failure one time within a session or something. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
that's, I'm slowly pulling back the amount of stress loads somewhere, right? Or my sleep isn't good, so I need to figure out what part of my sleep, you know, is the problems. I know that we were trying to like aim towards sleep a lot. I guess we were going into the whole recovery equation thing a
Well,
little bit more.
that's kind of where I was going to go next, because I was going to talk about how does sleep affect, at least from our perspective. I want to go into more of, or allow you to go into how sleep affects muscle building and recovery, which is basically the same thing in a sense. But if you want to touch on that, I think that would probably be the perfect gateway into what you're actually going into anyway.
Yeah, we kind of already started on that one, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's so in the sleep cycles too, we mentioned REM sleep and REM sleep. A lot of the time, or sorry, REM, so those are the same thing actually. REM sleep and deep sleep. The deep sleep tends to be what they consider more body restorative. Like it's a process that is more restorative to tissues in the body. And then REM sleep is usually considered more brain restorative, right?
Yep.
So you need both. And they occur at different times of the night also. That's why having not only enough, like sufficient length of sleep is important, but having good sleep, or as good as possible from start to finish. So you have, you know, so all of them, and those aren't the only two things that happen while you sleep. There's other restorative processes, but that's, you know, that's the reason that you would want this entire, you know, length of 7 or 8 hours or whatever it is to be restful, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's essentially how the two main sleep cycles work in terms of recovery. Now, how does it actually impact? There's a couple ways it would actually impact your progress. You know, like why? I guess the question would be, well, why would you not make as good a progress if you didn't sleep as much? I guess that's a good enough question. First one is your performance is going to suck at some point. Eventually,
Yeah.
I mean, eventually, if you have enough sleep debt, your performance is going to be just less than optimal, right?
Yeah. I can attest to that. Yeah. My
Yeah,
performance
and
sucked for like a good like 3. It would take a lot longer now that I'm getting solid sleep. I'm hitting PRs like daily compared to when I was working that job. It was like maybe a PR on a certain exercise like every like 3 weeks, because it's like tough to get that. Once you get into that cycle, it's like every so days, the rotation of days that you work was different. So it's like
right,
sometimes your day for that lift was on a good sleep night and you actually hit a PR. So
right.
yeah.
Yeah, it's the work schedule thing's kind of a different topic, but yeah. So I mean, first off, your performance can get down. Now, I think a lot of people kind of mask that for a while. They can kind of force themselves to make progress for a certain amount of time in the gym. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think most people can do that for a while, and people do it in prep all the time, you know, because you're fatigued. Um, but also from just a like actual muscle building process, the nervous system communicates with muscle tissue, and part of the rebuilding process does involve the nervous system, right? So, you know, if your nervous system's all beat to shit, you're not going to actually build muscle as effectively either.
Yeah.
So it's not just recovery. it's also, it's also the actual communication between your nervous system and your muscular system, and actually rebuilding tissue and expanding tissue, and, and contracting tissue when you need to train, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, like there's actual muscle building properties that are involved there. It's really, like I said, it's really a nervous system thing more than anything. Because your nervous system is what controls muscular function, both skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, which would be like your GI tract, and contractility, like moving food and stuff through. So that's it. Yeah, I mean, it could affect other things too. It could affect like your digestion and all that as well, kind of indirectly. But yeah, from an actual muscle building standpoint, that's kind of where the sleep comes into play. And like I said, I just think that I always call it, and I've used this term a lot, I always call it subjective well-being, where they kind of like get used to feeling, you know what I mean? Like they just get used to feeling a certain way, or they get used to using a gram of caffeine every day. Like they're just, you know what I mean? Like it's so easy. Like it's so easy to do. It can literally happen to anyone. Like I've done it. Everyone's done it. It's not difficult to fall into that trap. And it's just such a slippery slope, because you can't, it's like, oh, well, I'll make up for it later. Like I said, that's not really how it works. And also, and this little bit of caffeine turns into this much. And then you're like, oh, I'll wean off. It's like, you can wean off. It's a total pain in the ass, but no one wants to wean off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's just a really like bad cycle that people get in. And I think the biggest thing people can learn is just how to decipher when they should push through it and when they should not. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. So when is that? So how do you go about doing that? Because this is something where I think actually it's pretty funny, because I was talking to Thomas Monk, who's also a coach on Team Tumnick with Mark.
I know Tom. Oh yeah.
Yeah, we were actually on the phone talking about you yesterday, because we were having this came up our podcast episode, and he was talking about the Whoop band, and he mentioned last night he was like, I got a shit night of sleep, and he's like, it showed like a 36%, but I was like, so you're gonna take a rest day? And he's like, I might need to push through. So he's like, I think that helps you gauge a lot, but that Whoop band might be an excuse for people to keep taking steps back, which I think is something that you're about to touch on, which is either that you actually need to take that rest day, or you need to just push through it and get that training session in for the day.
Yep. Yeah, I would look at that total equation. Look at not only what happened before. So in his case, like he's looking at his Whoop band, and it said, he wasn't fully recovered, right?
Yeah.
But also look at what's happening afterwards. Do you have maybe you have 2 days off from training after that in your in your split, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, okay, well, you could justify it in that case, you know what I mean? Where you're basically intentionally overreaching very short term for that day or whatever, and then you're resting, right? So yeah. I'm always now do you have like 3 back-to-back training days? All right, well, if I wake up on day 1 of 3 back-to-back training days and your sleep wasn't good right before day 1 and you're already kind of in the hole, it's like, oh, that might be problematic. You know what I mean? Like, going to try to train 3 days in a row or whatever with already being in sleep and stressed at.
Got it.
So that's the way I would look at it, is like, I said, look at, and I alluded to this earlier, look at what the person's stress capacity is. So let's say that someone is normally 95% of the time they're on their game. They can, their sleep's good, their stress is good, all this. If they push through on one day, they're going to be fine, right? Because we talked about that earlier. Like a normal person with good, I'm not even going to say normal because most people probably don't have good habits. That's a bad one. A person that's functioning well, if they push through on one day, they're probably going to be all right. They'll probably be okay. Now you take someone like a couple of the people that I've mentioned on here as examples, and they wake up and they're off. Nah, it's not worth it, because they're just going to keep digging that hole where they will not recover well from that, right? Because they don't have the resources on their pie chart to, because it's like, ideally when I use that chart example, we don't want it to be completely filled in. I want like 5 or 10% on their leeway in case I need it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just in case I need it. So if my sleep is a little off, or I had a training session that ended up being a little more stressful than another, I had a life stressor or something, like I have a little bit of cushion to where I'm going to be okay. And yes, there are periods where you don't want too much, though, from like a progress standpoint. You don't want too much left on the pie chart, because you do have to push yourself hard enough to create an adaptation when you train. So and what I say with like why I mention that is that if you're so focused on recovery to where you're under training, you're also not going to make progress.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I did a little video on this one. It was on one of my YouTube videos, but I kind of had a line where it was like, I'll use a more advanced person, because it's harder for an advanced person, because for an advanced person, we'll have 3 spaces. So we'll have, here's under training, here is optimal training where they're, just doing just enough. And right past that is overtraining. So you can see how between optimal and overtraining, they've got like this much space. You know what I mean?
Yep.
That's because they are advanced, and it takes a lot more stimulus for them to create an adaptation to make progress. Now, the problem with that is their recovery capacity isn't any greater. They just literally have a smaller window that they can make progress. So if I took someone that was novice, or even, maybe intermediate or something, they're going to have under training optimal. Their optimal window is going to be huge, a lot bigger, right?
Yeah.
And their overtraining is over here. So they can pretty much train anywhere in that optimal window, and they're going to make progress, and they're not going to overtrain. It's just, as you get more advanced, you have to be a little more strategic, because you require a lot more to make progress, whether it's more weight, or if people are doing more volume or whatever, they're going to require more of something to make progress. But they also are going to be more susceptible to overtraining, because they have such small room for error.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, I guess from your perspective, it's like when you kind of do like DC training, it's very brutal. That shit's not easy. And that's or anything, like even me training with like using Mark's training, it's train to failure. Like there is that point where you're gonna overexceed, but it's so far between, like you mentioned, between me and you, I'm more intermediate now. So it's more like I still have a ton of room. With you though, with that DC training, it's very, very specific with what you're actually hitting and how hard like it's being hit, to the point where you might actually overdo it, where you won't recover.
Right. Yeah. And part of that's kind of like a learning thing. It's like learning when you should take a day off or whatever. Because like right now I'm doing 4 days a week, most weeks, but some weeks I don't, some weeks I'm like, nope, I feel like ass. I'm not doing it. I'm doing 3 days. Will I make any progress that week? Maybe not. I might not make progress. It might not be enough stimulus. I might just maintain that week, but I'm not overshooting and digging myself in the hole so the next week I can make progress again.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, it's harder for a more advanced person to make progress. Obviously, I mean, everybody knows that if you've been after a certain point, like you're just not going to pile on muscle super quick. But just learning those little skills and cues and things is going to be hugely important in the long run. And just not being afraid. You can't be afraid to train as hard as you need to, but you can't be afraid to recover as hard as you need to also. Like I know that's kind of a trap. Like I don't even call it a trap. It's just kind of a tendency for a lot of people is they just like, oh, I don't like off days, or they just don't like not training. I literally have zero issue not training at all. It does not bother me at all in the least bit.
Yeah.
Because I know if I'm not training, plus I have plenty of stuff to do, so that helps because I'm not bored.
Yeah.
I mean, that helps. But I just know that if I'm not training, I'm still recovering and I'm making progress because I'm not training for a purpose. Like there's a purpose a reason that I'm not training. Just like there's a reason that I'm training. You know what I mean? So it doesn't bother me. I had a girl today, and she probably listens to podcasts, but it was funny because we're working on some like health issues and stuff and recovering, but like as an indirect benefit, I reduced the amount of training that she was doing. Now her training, I didn't like back the intensity off, which she's still training like pretty intensely, but it's just less training. And the first 2 weeks, she said she's hit a PR like every single day. And she's like, and she's been training. I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to look at her information, but I think she's been training probably at least like, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, like a good amount of time.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah. She's not new. She's competed at, the national level. She lives in Canada. So like in Canada. So, I mean, she's not like a beginner. And it's funny because it's all we did was basically just optimize her recovery equation to where she could recover better. And so now, we'll probably be able to fix her health issues, but also she'll probably make more progress.
Yeah.
In the meantime, she was literally just doing too much. That's all it was. She was just doing too much.
Yeah. I think you probably also like those rest days too, because you're probably eating a bit less food. I hate them because I'm on way less food than you are, but I hate being on less. I like it just because I get so much work done on my rest days, but it's like I like having my food. And Mark said I'm eventually going to hate that, but for now I love it. So it just comes to that. But I think one thing to I think this one quote always comes up whenever I talk about sleep and recovery. It's always, and whether it's training and stuff like that, it's always less is more and better is better. It's like
better's always better.
Yeah, exactly. That's the one with training. Better is always better, but less is more usually.
Well, I kind of put it like this: more is better until it's not.
Yeah.
It is like more is always better until it's not, because more is going to be better until, like I said, until you hit that point where it's too much and then it's not. Yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's always going to be that way. That really applies to pretty much all things, it's just, you want to get as much as you can out of something before it becomes negative. So yeah, awesome. It's just a hard mindset for people to get.
Yeah. I think it comes once you get them into that, it makes it a lot easier. Like my one client, I scaled his training back. He told me how much he was in. He was in like 6 days a week. I scaled him back and I was like, okay, we're going to scale back to like 4, and it's literally going to be better is better. So we're going to focus on execution, form, and everything to make it as best as possible. And then maybe we'll add more from there if you need to, which he won't. Clearly he doesn't. But I remember getting a text from him the first day and he's like, only doing 4 days. And I was like, yeah, just when you see your plan, he only looked at it real quick, but he didn't see what the sets were. And I was like, well, then once you read the rest of the plan, you'll figure it out real quick. But I think this has been an awesome episode. I appreciate you coming on this show and speaking everything you have about sleep. Would love to do this again about a different topic another time. So maybe we'll link up and do another one for you guys. But I kind of want to just end it not with the same three that I ended with last time, but kind of just leave them with what three things do you kind of want people to leave with if they could have three main points about sleep that people should take away to apply today.
Okay. So I'm gonna change your question to recovery.
Okay, gotcha.
So what did say three main things to take away from the episode? I think the first one would be that example of the recovery equation or capacity. You know, understanding the pie chart, understanding the total amount of resources, and understanding where, like, how each thing fits in for you specifically as a person between your schedule and your life and your training and all that. So that's like a real useful tool if you can view it that way. Another one would be realize that your routine starts when you get up, not just before bed. It's the whole, sleep wake time, what you do in the morning, how you treat your nervous system during the day. You know what I mean? That's all part of, that's all part of the recovery equation and sleep equation. It's not just, you can't be like a total asshole to your body all day long and then just slap your blue light blockers on at night and expect,
Expect you
like magically. That. It's not going to happen. Let's see. A third one. I think too would, a third one I guess would just be awareness. Like I talked about, being more aware of how you're actually reacting to things and how you're actually, how often you're getting a stress response to things. So whether it be whatever it is, anything in your whole day. So you can use like the little tally mark thing that I mentioned, or journaling, or whatever it is. If you're one of those people that stops breathing during the day, or one of those people that seemingly reacts negative to just about everything, you'll know who you are.
Yeah.
That's something to work on. It makes a huge difference.
Awesome. So that'd
probably be three things.
Yeah, those are three really good ones, because I'm definitely going to implement the last one and the first one, actually, because I want to document when I'm going to feel stressed, because I need to see how many times, because I'm actually scared to tally mark my own thing. But we'll see. We'll see how that goes, and I'll let you know. But before we leave the show, tell everybody basically where they can find you. I know we did this last time, but shameless plug yourself. If people have any further questions about sleep and recovery.
Sure. I normally just tell people the best place would just be on. So if you go to my Facebook or my Instagram, in my bio, I have the little link tree that has a link to all my stuff. So it has my other social medias, has my YouTube channel. It has, like, usually I put on like any type of upcoming, like if I have a seminar or something going on that's upcoming, it'll be on there. Websites on there. So basically, my email address is normally in my bio and all that. So I mean, all that stuff. My Facebook, just type my name in, you'll see. There's probably some other Austin Stouts out there. I'm the bodybuilding flexing guy in mind. So look for that. I have a tan in the photo. The Instagram, it's Austin ST8, the number 8. You can find everything you need on those two places.
Awesome. First off, I want to say thank you for coming on the show. And before we leave, everybody, if you enjoyed any part of this or you learned a lot, this is the first of at least a few more deep rooted episodes into some of the topics that might help you out a lot. So if you enjoyed this, screenshot it, tag Austin and I, and put it on your Instagram stories, and we'll show some love back. So everybody, thank you for listening to this episode of the Ace of Spada podcast.